On the morning of December 26, 1996, the city of Boulder, Colorado was still quiet after Christmas. The streets were filled with decorative lights, and families were enjoying warm moments with their loved ones. But for the Ramsey family, one of the wealthiest and most prestigious families in the area, that day was far from ordinary. At 5:52 a.m., the 911 emergency dispatch received a call from Patsy Ramsey, the mother of JonBenét Ramsey. Her voice was panicked, broken, and seemed to be in a state of absolute terror. "Hello, officer. Please help me. My daughter has been kidnapped. We found a ransom note." The police force immediately arrived at the Ramsey residence, a luxurious mansion fully equipped with modern amenities, located in Boulder's affluent neighborhood. When they arrived, Patsy, trembling, handed them a 2.5-page ransom note, written on paper and with a pen from inside their own home. The ransom note read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, we are a foreign faction holding your daughter captive. If you want her to be safe, prepare $118,000 in ransom money. If you contact the police, we will kill her." But one peculiar detail stood out. This amount matched exactly the year-end bonus that John Ramsey, JonBenét's father, had just received from his company. How did the kidnapper know this detail? A kidnapping or a staged deception? Police searched the vast house but found no signs of forced entry. Every door was locked and windows showed no signs of tampering. It seemed impossible for someone from the outside to have entered without leaving a trace. The Ramsey family, including John Ramsey, father of the victim, Patsy Ramsey, mother of the victim, and Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, all insisted that they had slept soundly the night before and had heard nothing unusual. A sealed house, a mysterious ransom note, a missing child. Police began to suspect that the 6-year-old girl might still be somewhere in the house. But only when they continued their investigation did the horrifying truth slowly unfold. At 1 p.m., nearly 8 hours after police arrived at the scene, a detective suggested that John Ramsey search the house once more. John went down to the basement, a place that had not been thoroughly checked earlier. Mere seconds later, a scream shattered the silence of the house. John Ramsey stepped out of the basement, carrying JonBenét's lifeless body in his arms. JonBenét was dead. This was not a kidnapping. This was a murder. Her body was found in a small room in the basement, with a garrote wrapped around her neck, duct tape covering her mouth, her hands tightly bound, signs of head trauma. John wailed in anguish, Patsy fainted, and Burke remained in the living room showing no particular reaction. But the strangest part? Police found no signs of forced entry, nor any evidence suggesting that an intruder had broken into the house. JonBenét had been murdered inside her own home. So, who was the killer? The truth about this case would soon shock all of America, as police began to uncover suspicious details that pointed directly to the Ramsey family itself. The death of JonBenét Ramsey quickly became one of the most shocking cases in America at the time. A 6-year-old girl, a former child beauty queen, murdered inside her own home just hours after Christmas. But what was the strangest part? Police found no signs of forced entry from outside. Could this have been an inside job? As soon as JonBenét's body was discovered, Boulder police began their forensic investigation. They searched the entire house, but what they found only deepened the mystery. No signs of forced entry. All doors were locked as usual. No unfamiliar footprints. Police found no shoe prints that didn't belong to the family. No security cameras captured anyone entering or leaving that night. If no one had broken in, then who was the killer? Police turned their attention to the ransom note and immediately noticed several strange inconsistencies. An unusually long ransom note. Most kidnapping demands are just a few lines, yet this note was over 2 pages long, almost like an essay. Written with pen and paper from inside the Ramsey home. This meant that whoever wrote it had been inside the house for a long time, an unusual move for a kidnapper. The ransom amount matched John Ramsey's bonus exactly, a highly specific detail that only someone close to the family would know. Would a real kidnapper calmly sit down and write a lengthy letter inside the victim's house instead of fleeing immediately? JonBenét's body was taken to the forensic lab. The results were shocking. Cause of death, strangulation with a homemade garrote. The device was improvised on site. Severe head trauma. A blow to the skull, likely knocking her unconscious before she was strangled. Evidence of sexual assault. Signs indicated she may have been assaulted before or after her death, but the perpetrator remained unidentified. No fingerprints on the duct tape or bindings. This suggested that the killer wore gloves, but if that were the case, why leave a handwritten note with clear penmanship? Who was this killer that could remain so calm and methodical? At this point, police asked the biggest question of all. Could the killer have been someone inside the family? The Ramsey family was immediately investigated. John Ramsey, father, a successful businessman, millionaire, but had a tense relationship with the media. Patsy Ramsey, mother, a former beauty queen who had pushed JonBenét into beauty pageants from a young age. Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, a child who showed little to no reaction after learning of his sister's death. All three displayed strange behavior after police arrived at the scene. They did not fully cooperate with police from the beginning. They hired attorneys just hours after JonBenét's body was found. They refused to take formal police interviews in the early days of the investigation. If they had nothing to hide, why were they acting this way? One of the biggest reasons this case remained unsolved was because police made serious mistakes from the start. When John Ramsey found JonBenét's body, he picked her up and carried her to the living room. This contaminated the crime scene, erasing crucial forensic evidence. Family friends were allowed to enter the home on the same day, mixing their footprints with any possible evidence at the scene. Police failed to secure the crime scene immediately to move freely, allowing family members to move further, compromising the evidence. A completely compromised crime scene. And with that, some of the most critical clues that could have led to the killer were lost forever. So was the Ramsey family truly involved in JonBenét's death, or had police overlooked another suspect? The investigation continued, and another shocking revelation was about to emerge, a clue that could change the entire direction of the case. The death of JonBenét Ramsey quickly became the most shocking case in America at the time. A 6-year-old girl, a former child beauty queen, murdered inside her own home just hours after Christmas. But the strangest part? Police found no signs of forced entry. Could this have been an inside job? As soon as JonBenét's body was discovered, Boulder police launched their investigation. They searched the entire house, but the more they looked, the more confusing everything became. There was no sign of forced entry. Every door was locked. No strange footprints. Police found no shoe prints that didn't belong to someone in the family. No security cameras caught anyone coming in or out of the house that night. If no one broke in, then who was the killer? Police turned their attention to the ransom note, and immediately, strange inconsistencies surfaced. The note was unusually long. Most ransom notes are just a few sentences, but this one stretched over 2.5 pages, almost like an essay. Even stranger, it was written with pen and paper from inside the Ramsey home. This meant that whoever wrote it had been inside the house for a significant amount of time, a bizarre choice for a kidnapper. And the ransom demand? $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's annual bonus. Would a real kidnapper have the patience to sit and write such a long letter inside the victim's house instead of fleeing immediately? JonBenét's body was taken to the forensic lab for examination, and the results were horrifying. The cause of death was strangulation, using a homemade garrote, improvised right at the crime scene. There was also severe head trauma, likely from a hard blow to the skull, which could have knocked her unconscious before she was strangled. Most disturbingly, forensic evidence suggested JonBenét had been sexually assaulted, though the perpetrator remained unknown. And yet, despite all this, no fingerprints were found on the duct tape or the bindings. It seemed like the killer wore gloves. But if that were the case, why leave a handwritten note? At this point, police asked the biggest question. Could the killer have been someone inside the family? Immediately, the Ramsey family came under suspicion. John Ramsey, the father, was a wealthy businessman, but his reaction to finding his daughter's body raised questions. Instead of waiting for the police, he picked JonBenét up and carried her to the living room, contaminating the crime scene. And the next day, instead of staying in Boulder to cooperate with investigators, he boarded a plane to Atlanta, a highly unusual move. Patsy Ramsey, the mother, was the one who called 911, but there were suspicious details in her behavior. In the emergency call recording, she sounded panicked, but at the very end of the call, a child's voice could be heard. Evidence that Burke, JonBenét's older brother, had been awake and possibly listening to everything. And then there was the ransom note. Handwriting analysis suggested that Patsy's writing had similarities to the note. Burke Ramsey, just 9 years old at the time, became the most controversial figure in the case. He showed no visible signs of grief after JonBenét's death. Some psychologists suggested an accident. Perhaps Burke had hit his sister with a heavy object, causing her fatal head injury, and the parents staged the crime to cover it up. But no solid evidence ever emerged to support this theory. Had the police focused on the wrong suspects? Some believed an unknown intruder had broken into the house and murdered JonBenét. There was a broken basement window that could have been an entry point. Small traces of unidentified blood were found on JonBenét's clothing, blood that didn't match anyone in the Ramsey family. The autopsy showed signs of sexual assault, which could suggest a different kind of motive. So who was this mystery intruder? Police looked into various suspects, including a gardener, a mail carrier, and acquaintances of the family, but no one could be directly linked to the crime. Was JonBenét's killer still out there? Another theory emerged. What if the murderer wasn't an outsider, but someone close to the family? JonBenét was a child beauty queen, often in the public eye. Could a disturbed individual have been watching her, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? The ransom note seemed to suggest that the killer knew details about the Ramsey family's finances. But if it was an outsider, why didn't they take JonBenét and escape? Why kill her inside the house? Then, in 1998, forensic testing revealed something shocking. An unknown DNA sample was found on JonBenét's clothing. It didn't match John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey. This seemed to clear the family of suspicion. But there was a problem. The DNA also didn't match any known suspect. Who left this DNA, and why has no one ever been arrested? The truth is, the investigation was flawed from the start. Police made critical mistakes, the crime scene was compromised, JonBenét's body was moved, erasing key forensic evidence. The ransom note wasn't properly analyzed in the early hours. Every piece of evidence could have been contaminated, making it nearly impossible to identify the real killer. So, who killed JonBenét? By this point, police had no clear answers. But 10 years later, in 2006, a leaked document would change everything and reshape the entire investigation. On August 16, 2006, police unexpectedly arrested a man named John Mark Carr in Bangkok, Thailand. Carr was a 41-year-old elementary school teacher with a history of obsession over child murder cases. He confessed to killing JonBenét Ramsey, claiming it was an accident while he was loving her. He described crime scene details that only the real killer would know. Had police finally found the murderer? But just days later, everything collapsed. DNA mismatch, a false confession. As soon as Carr was arrested, police compared his DNA with the unidentified DNA found on JonBenét's clothing. The result, no match. There was no evidence placing Carr in Boulder on Christmas night in 1996. His family members confirmed he was nowhere near Colorado at the time of the murder. Carr was nothing more than a delusional attention seeker, confessing to a crime he didn't commit just to gain notoriety. Police had no choice but to release him. The case was back to square one. The 2006 leaked document, a shocking truth. That same year, a legal report from 1999, kept hidden for nearly a decade, was suddenly leaked. Its contents sent shockwaves across America. This report revealed that a grand jury in 1999 had actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges of endangering a child leading to death, obstructing the investigation of a murder. This meant that both police and prosecutors once believed there was enough evidence to suggest JonBenét's parents were involved. But why were they never charged? The answer: the district attorney refused to take the case to trial. At the time, prosecutor Alex Hunter decided there wasn't enough evidence to convict the Ramseys in court. This raised a major question. If a grand jury believed the Ramseys were guilty, why did the legal system protect them? Public outrage: were the Ramseys innocent or were they protected? As soon as this document was leaked, the public began questioning the transparency of the case. Were the Ramseys shielded because of their wealth and power? Why did the grand jury push for prosecution but the authorities refused to take action? If they were truly innocent, why wasn't this report made public back in 1999? For many, this only fueled suspicions that the Ramseys knew more than they ever admitted. But another theory arose. If the Ramseys were innocent, had police wasted decades chasing the wrong suspects? The case hits another dead end. A forgotten clue resurfaces. In 2008, advances in DNA technology allowed forensic experts to re-examine the DNA sample found on JonBenét's clothing. The result: the DNA did not match any member of the Ramsey family. What did this mean? It suggested the killer might not have been from the Ramsey family, but someone else who had never been caught. Or the DNA could have been an unrelated sample, accidentally contaminating the investigation. And just like that, the case reached another dead end. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey was not just another homicide. It became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history, a case that millions of people still follow to this day. With hundreds of theories and numerous suspects, no one has ever been convicted. So what really happened? Why has this case never been solved? Life after the murder. The Ramsey family's fate. After police announced that the DNA found on JonBenét's clothing did not match any family member, many believed John and Patsy Ramsey were truly innocent. Yet despite decades of investigation, the case remains a mystery. And here's why. Initial police mistakes. The crime scene was compromised, leading to the loss of crucial evidence. No eyewitnesses. No one saw exactly what happened that night. DNA evidence remains unidentified. The DNA sample found on JonBenét's clothing is still a mystery. The Ramsey family refused full cooperation. Whether guilty or not, their behavior raised suspicion. All of these factors led to a dead end. If police had handled the crime scene properly from the start, could this case have been solved years ago? John Ramsey continued his life but remained under public scrutiny. Patsy Ramsey died in 2006 from ovarian cancer, taking any secrets about the case to her grave. Burke Ramsey, Jonat's brother, lived a private life, but his 2016 interview sparked controversy. Although legally cleared, the Ramsey family remains under suspicion. The question remains, if they were innocent, why did they act so strangely? The most popular theories. More than 20 years later, 3 major theories still dominate discussions about the case. Theory 1, Burke Ramsey. Was it a cover-up for an accident? One of the most controversial theories suggests that Burke Ramsey, JonBenét's 9-year-old brother, accidentally caused her death, and his parents staged the kidnapping to cover it up. Burke had a history of aggression toward JonBenét when angry. JonBenét's head injury was consistent with a blow from a blunt object, such as a flashlight, which was found at the crime scene. The Ramsey family refused to let Burke be questioned immediately after the murder. But if Burke was the killer, how do we explain the unidentified DNA on JonBenét's clothing? Was this theory just speculation, or was something being hidden from the public? Theory 2. A predator broke into the house. Many believe that JonBenét was attacked by an unknown intruder on Christmas night. Signs of sexual assault were found on JonBenét's body. A broken basement window could have been the killer's entry point. The DNA evidence on JonBenét's clothing did not match anyone in the family. But if an intruder was responsible, why were there no signs of a struggle? And why would they take the time to write a 2.5-page ransom note? Was this a random act of violence, or was someone deliberately trying to mislead the investigation? Theory 3. A close acquaintance was responsible. Another theory suggests that JonBenét's killer was someone who personally knew the family. The ransom note contained details that only someone close to the Ramseys would know. No forced entry. The killer may have entered the house without breaking in. Several family acquaintances were investigated, but none were charged. But if the murderer was an insider, why would they kill JonBenét? And why has the case never been solved? Was there someone within the Ramsey family's inner circle who committed the crime? Did police overlook an important suspect?